Welcome to A State of Mind, the podcast that brings together consciousness, meditation, mindfulness, psychology, psychedelics, and so much more in pursuit of this mystery we call life. This is Julian Royce. Thank you for tuning in. Today I am speaking with my friend Mona, and their artist name or stage name, whatever you want to call it, is Monalicious. That's the name they release music under, and this was a really fun conversation. We talk about a lot of cool stuff like Dungeons and Dragons, and part of what we talked about with Dungeons and Dragons is consciously creating and stepping into a persona. For example, like a rock star, or an artist or a performer, and how having that different persona, can help one to then perform in a different way. I tend to think about this in my own life with the expression wearing different hats, so to speak. For example, in my work as a therapist, I'm wearing my therapist hat. And here as host of this podcast, I put on my podcast hat. But I think it can actually be pretty profound to make these different roles we embody or inhabit conscious. And we can bring consciousness to these different parts of ourselves, which can show up in different ways and in different contexts. And in our conversation, we talk about music, art and creativity. And here's a short clip of a song by Mona called Cooped Up. Mona shares with us about high school classes that they have been teaching, and that to me was really interesting to hear about. Mona has really developed and shared some really cool curriculum with students from lower income or disadvantaged areas in Denver. And one of the things I really appreciated about this conversation, a message that I felt come through, which we've all heard a million times, but it struck me in a new way. And that is not giving up and perseverance and having some confidence, believing in yourself and keeping up, keep going. Mona shares with us an experience of putting on a show, not many people coming to it. And instead of taking that to mean that, they should stop doing what they're doing and what they love to do, they learned from it and kept going and put on a lot of great events and shows since then. I'm going to play a clip for you guys of a song called All Caught Up. If you go to monaliciousmedia.com, you can see the music video for this. And it features Corwin Mandel, who was on the podcast last summer. That episode is called Tiny Temples and Natural Building. He builds these tiny homes. So here's All Caught Up.
I hope you want me just as bad as I want you. I hope you want me just as bad as I want you. There is nothing stronger than love, the way it takes you over. There you are in all your thoughts, spinning around, all caught up.
So I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And without further ado, I bring you Monalicious. thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and you perform music under the name Monalicious, right?
I do.
Cool. We were just talking before we started recording. You're also now teaching at a high school.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe just introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah.
I know you do a lot of different things.
I do a lot of different things. Today, I'm a human, and I try to be that most days. But, yeah, as you mentioned, I have been focusing a lot of energy shifting from the spotlight being on, like, Monalicious as a artist, but shifting into finding, like, my place in the world as an educator, and I've been fortunate enough to fall into a job at Youth on Record, and I'm a teaching artist there. So I go into high schools, and this is my 4th high school that I've been at. This year I'm at Dr. Martin Luther King Early College in Denver.
You said 4th high school?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's my 4th year of teaching, and just been this process of, like, kind of being plucked out of my reality and thrown into the classroom, and I finally feel like I'm getting the flow.
That's so cool. Are you going to the high school like once a week?
I'm there 5 days a week.
Oh, 5 days.
Yeah. So I teach 4-credit class, which means that it's like a class on there that they go to each day.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And
I've taught mindfulness in middle schools and a little bit in high schools, but it would just be like once or twice a week, and it was, so not maybe as much as what you're doing. So that's a great experience to get to teach and spend time with kids like that.
Definitely. And plus the fact that I get to teach about something I'm so passionate about, and something that I'm interested in learning more about in general.
Right.
Because, like, a huge part of the teacher process is being a student yourself and continuously refining your pedagogy so that it's relevant to each, group of students that you have each year, each quarter, each school that you're at, each community that you're serving.
Right.
And
so try to really speak to that particular group or people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so feeling really excited, teaching music creation to the high school and the middle school there, and also teaching a class called Identity, Power, and Music, and that's like an ethnic studies, gender studies class where we utilize music as a lens to observe the world and to learn more about ourselves.
And you said Identity, Power, and Music?
Yeah.
It's an interesting title.
Yeah.
The power, like power dynamics, power politically.
Power in a lot of, like the word power is so connected and interweaved in our world. And a lot of communities that I serve are navigating a narrative of disempowerment. And so offering young people an opportunity. So that
navigating a narrative of disempowerment.
Yeah.
Like the story, the understanding of their place in society is one of being disempowered.
Totally. And easy to get caught up in, In any community, it's easy to get caught up in disempowerment through the messages that you're internalizing, whether it be media or like what you see in your community.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting too. Like you said, any community, and I feel like that's true. Like any community could, or any member of a community could see themselves as being disempowered. Like I have, I don't know, to make it a little more concrete. Like I've seen a lot of people talk about identity and race and gender and this stuff, and it's like the dominant, people are people like me who are white and male will be part of that, or heterosexual, but then I've talked to white men who feel like they're being disempowered, and so it's like interesting that could be perceived so differently, and then there's just such a spectrum of ways people are trying to navigate this stuff, or
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then like another lens of looking at power is power dynamics. Like, how does your intersectionality affect like the power that is you are perceived to have in your community or in the world? Why is it? And then looking at like the world as kind of this object of reflection. Like, why is it that, you know, we perceive women to be less powerful in some ways, or that we put such a gender role on men as being powerful, like that's a male attribute. So there's like so many different ways to break down power, even like
it's complex.
Today we talked about social power and monolithic power, and like so even talking about the power of people. And like how movements, how there's like how groups of people have power to make movements happen, and as well as like looking at monolithic power as defining what that even is, like having.
Well, yeah. What do you mean by that?
So monolithic power is pretty much when like one person or a group of elite people control like a society, and so that it's like a small group of people or one person versus like the entirety of people. And social power would be a model where the people in power are like elected by the people and like put in that place by the people, which we kind of sort of have.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of don't. Because when we think about the pathways to becoming political, like a politician, there's like gatekeeping to that. It's not accessible to all people.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot. It's like really...
It's a big conversation.
Yeah. And
so are you teaching this online?
Virtually, yeah, because of COVID.
Because of COVID? Yeah.
Yeah.
How has that been?
I think it's not preferred, but, you know...
It's working?
Just like anything, you find ways to be resilient and...
Yeah, that's a great word, resilient.
Yeah.
Make the best of it. And,
totally.
I really... Like, I can't imagine being an elementary school teacher or an elementary school student.
Yeah.
And being online all day like that. It's just, man, that's got to be so difficult. And But I think by the time you're in high school, you can sit and engage more in that medium, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, for better or worse, we get used to sitting for long periods of time and staring at a screen. It's interesting how coronavirus has increased our screen time so much.
Most
I'm really
definitely
grateful you get to come here in person. That feels like such a treat. I just got a negative coronavirus test yesterday, so now I feel, I don't know, it feels like peace of mind.
Totally.
You know, and I am being cautious and trying to find my way with it, but yeah.
Definitely, and I think it's very responsible of you.
Yeah. Well, I did go, you know, saw a number of people over Halloween. That was part of the impetus of it. And the cases are rising and, you know.
Yeah.
So it was free, and it got the results a few days later.
Nice.
So actually it was pretty easy to get tested.
I love hearing that.
Yeah.
I'm happy.
You just drive through and they stick this thing up your nose. It was weird. I didn't expect that part. Like I didn't know that. So like roll down the window and they're like, you register ahead of time. And they like had my name and they're like, are you Julian? I'm like, yeah. And they're like, okay. Just like stick this swab up your nose.
Yeah, I'm just like so happy to hear about the accessibility of testing.
Yeah.
And that it's like free and quick.
Yeah, it was free, it was quick. You just drove up and drive out. And then it is accessible. And I just had the thought, like, you have, like, if I didn't have a car, how would I have gotten there? And how would you drive through if you don't have a car to drive through? Mm-hmm. So I think there's so many things like that in our society. Like, it's, on one hand, like, easy, and if you have the right things, like, if you have a car and the, you know, the smartphone and the, you know, like, sometimes I think about someone who doesn't have something like that we can so easily take for granted.
Totally.
Like how many roadblocks, metaphorically speaking, that puts up if you don't have those things. I mean, you don't have to have a car to survive, but in America, there's a lot of things where not having a car is a pretty big hurdle.
Yeah.
So.
I feel that I was thinking about how having a car is also like you have to buy into a system that perhaps you don't even want to.
Right.
But it's
Totally, yeah.
the way the world's set up, like
Or at least the way our world's set up here in
Yeah.
America. Yeah.
totally. Well, even like I would prefer to have a car that, was a Tesla or like electronic,
Right.
but that's out of reach for me. And so to have a car, I
Right.
have to, buy into the whole oil and gas
Mhm.
industry and just perpetuate its existence.
Yeah, like you have a choice, but you kind of don't have a choice too.
Totally.
It's an interesting thing. Seems to me like we could make, like people would probably make fun of them, but those like little smart cars that were like, they're kind of small and
Yeah.
like, it doesn't seem like it'd be that hard to make a bunch of those that are electric and that could be affordable and, you know what I mean? Like that would probably be way better for the environment and
Yeah.
have some kind of government program to help people get them if they need a car and they don't have one.
Mm-hmm.
And like low impact and low fuel use or all that stuff.
Yeah. And at that point, we're talking about like a whole shift that's supported by the government
Right.
to move away
Some people would
from.
hate that kind of talk,
Yes.
but I think it would, if we take into account like the collective good of our climate, like it makes sense to look at things like that.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I've always been super perplexed by the idea of like greed and capitalism, like draining and the people, and like it doesn't make sense for people to not exist or the planet to be in turmoil because no one's going to be consuming anything if we're not like able to inhabit the planet.
Right.
If like
Like,
your
it's-
goal is
yeah.
to have us continuing to consume, you might as well make conscious culture like more popular so that we can continue to consume. It doesn't
Right,
seem
just
that
from
way.
a capitalist point of view. I think this, I don't know, this might be kind of dark to talk about. It's a whole other rabbit hole to go down, but like if you make something that is a necessity that we take for granted, something that you can market and sell, like water, like if anyone can get water and that's great and it's a human right, I think it should be, but if bottled water is way better than the stuff coming out of your tap and you can sell the bottled water, like it's a big thing for a capitalist corporation to start selling. And so, like in that movie Spaceballs, did you ever see that?
Yeah.
Like they have like canisters of air because they're like running out of air. So like the wealthy people have all this air that they've bought. And it's kind of like, an absurd extreme of where we kind of are heading to when you like degrade
Most definitely.
the natural system, and then wealthy people can afford the more pristine, healthier version of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think that's the road we should go down, but there's like economic pressures that some people look at it and they're like, how can we sell more water instead of making it free?
Yeah. Most definitely. There is some sort of motive behind it that makes sense to someone.
Oh yeah. Probably.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's maybe a sidetrack, but to get back to you and music,
Yeah.
you seem like someone who like just knew that you're a musician, like that's who you are, a creative person putting your art out there. Was there a moment where that became like you're like, I want to be a musician, I want to share music, or did it develop slowly over time? Or
Yeah, I think that's pretty much just been where my heart has been, and it was a great place for me to channel all of my like drive and passion, and I didn't seem to have any doors like or barriers in between me and trying things out.
that's an interesting thing. Like
yeah.
it didn't have a lot of struggle for you. Is that pretty?
No.
That's interesting. Maybe that's that like ease or grace, like this feels right and it makes sense. And
Yeah. I think there's a lot to, and that's even like the privilege of just having supportive parents. It like instills this belief in you that you can do anything, that you can be anyone. And I mean, I've done so many things just because I, like, decided to do it. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I did that. Cool.
That's inspiring to hear.
Yeah.
Like what's an example of that in your life?
I would say last year I put on 2 theater productions. So I directed, and they're like, I say theater productions because they were theatrical, but they were like immersive experiences where I mixed together music and circus, and we had like characters in the crowd, and we created this like narrative and this story arc, and like
But you had people in the crowd who were part of it?
yeah.
That's so cool. I love that.
And like literally like people dressed up and interacting. We had this one where, and like this whole card game mixed into it as well, where you show up and you're given a card and like a manual, and you have to like go and interact with the game, and
It's like blurring the line between audience and participant and
totally
the creators.
very immersive. I was super inspired by Meow Wolf. I went to their New Year's party
Cool.
in at the beginning of 2019, and
So
it was
a
just
couple of
like,
years ago. Do you want to
yeah.
share with people what Meow Wolf is? Is that in New Mexico?
Yeah, they're building one here in Denver.
In Denver? Yeah, I heard about that.
And they're also building one in Washington, D.C. and in Las
cool.
Vegas.
Yeah.
But it's this like dreamland. Have you been there?
No, I haven't.
Oh, wow. So it is like a dream pretty much, but it's, you walk in and you like open a door, and you would think when you open up a cabinet that you would just see a cabinet, you know? And this, for the first time, was a space where I could open up a cabinet and not be sure that it would be a normal cabinet. And like, it probably wasn't. It was like this portal to some other completely different space. And yeah, so it has all of these different...
It's like a whole world that you enter.
Yeah, and there's this story, and like, you'll read something, and it's like, don't, like, they're watching us, don't let them know that you're reading this, and you're like, oh my goodness, what? It just like drops you into this space, and yeah, very like multiverse, a bunch of different spaces, different rooms that like flow into each other in this really peculiar way.
Cool.
Yeah. And
That's beautiful.
and it not only opened up my perception in my mind of like, I could open up a cellar in my mind and it would continue going. Like there was just no more just like container. It was like I could,
Like infinite possibilities.
yeah, even in my mind is the craziest thing.
So you went there and then you get inspired to like create a performance, create a events, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, and just like dive into immersion and the idea of role playing. And I got really into Dungeons and Dragons around the
Oh,
same
that's so cool.
time. And
I
like
just
role
started
playing
playing
games.
I played Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid.
Nice.
And then just this last summer I started playing again with a group of friends, and it's been so interesting.
Yeah.
I want to do it more regularly. It really takes it's really interesting to get in your imagination like that.
Totally.
Like I'll feel affected by it like afterwards, like having it imagine the world so intensely.
Yeah.
You know, it's really, our minds are so powerful.
Yeah. I hope that I'm not don't get this rephrasing incorrect, but my partner when thinking about D&D relates it to like group therapy.
Oh,
Like everyone being able to play out these
playing out a role.
these subtle like relationship dynamics that don't necessarily they're not always on the surface, but like you get to potentially like fight with a character. Especially I play with a lot of people that are really close to me, and so I totally see playing out like
it's fascinating.
these different relationship dynamics.
Like in the imaginary world, and
Yeah.
you have more permission because it's not, it's a game.
Yeah,
So you
because
can
you're one
act
like
it that way.
layer out. It's like, no,
But
this
it
is
could
my
still,
character.
it could still like hurt someone, or they could get offended, or it's still possible.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
most definitely.
How many people are you playing with?
I've actually taken quite a bit of a hiatus since I became intertwined with my partner. But before that, I was playing at the beginning of quarantine. I was playing twice a week for like somewhere around 3 to 5 hours at a time. And then before that
with
was
like 3 or 4 people. Or?
2 different groups.
Oh, okay.
One group was about like 4 to 6 people with the dungeon master, and then I have another group that was about 5 people plus the dungeon master. So I had like 2 groups going.
Oh, you were really into it.
I was.
That's a whole nother level.
It.
It's powerful. It's almost like the opposite of all of our virtual reality video game stuff, and yet it kind of feels like you're in one of, you're in a video game, but it's like your mind. It's not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's so interesting.
And you're like creating it with people. It's collaborative.
It's collaborative, yeah, and it's creative, and you can act out different parts. And
totally.
Yeah.
I've had some really. It's helped me even with teaching because the DM will confront you with.
DM means dungeon master.
Dungeon master, yeah.
So they're like the person who's or who's kind of, they're not playing it, they're setting the stage. And, right?
Yeah. And I've had dungeon masters like confront me with, the first time I started playing, we were in this town that had this religious establishment that would like burn people in public that didn't profess their devotion to the religious figure, and like we were trying to infiltrate the religious establishment and dismantle it, and like these interesting, and I'm so down for dismantling of oppressive systems, and so like getting to even just play that out and
imagine it and
totally or like having a character come up and challenge me, and me having to articulate why I believe in, human rights or character rights, and, which is like silly, but it draws on a real life experience that I'm down to come up. Yeah,
that's cool that you've done that and you're sharing about that. I think it's interesting way for people to be able to connect and create. Like a lot of times when we all love movies and we all watch Netflix and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And this game, Dungeons and Dragons, is kind of like you can create and be a creator, a participant in your own movie like that.
Totally.
Make up what kind of character you want and how you want to look and what you want to do. And I feel like because I've watched so many movies, I'll kind of see, that kind of informs my imagination.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Most definitely. Yeah, I'm super grateful for role-playing games and role-playing in general. And that's why I even like...
It's interesting to rediscover it for me after so many years of like...
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, and I did it with my brothers and a couple friends we had, and then like people would like make fun of it, it was like dorky, and I got kind of self-conscious about it like later when I was like an older teenager, and it was like, maybe, I don't know, that's how it was at least in where I lived in North Carolina. And so then now it's like, wow, people are still doing this, people are doing it as adults, and it's like actually really powerful.
Yeah. I'm into it. And just in like immersion in general, like why not? Just like dress up as a clown and go to the store and like make a scene and like bring people out of their normalcy. Right. And give them a different experience, something to think about. And I think that I am passionate about inspiration and like exciting people in ways that life is not exciting.
Yeah. Passionate about inspiration. Life. I like that.
Yeah.
It's like that's what is so precious, is when you feel inspired, and it can be kind of rare, if someone's feeling depressed, it's like the lack of that inspiration. I mean, in my experience, inspiration goes up and down, but it is something you can like kind of cultivate and remember, and like you can get yourself inspired about something. Like, it takes like a leap of faith, right? You gotta kind of get into it. Yeah.
Which even like thinking about music in D&D, the character, the bard, he gives either themselves or their party members inspiration. as like a boost. And I think that also speaks to the essential role of artists in our culture to like stoke the fire of inspiration, to keep people compelled to existing, compelled to like diving into the unknown. And
right, it's part of the role of or gift of an artist.
Yeah,
especially a musical artist, maybe. I mean, I guess any kind of artist, but my mind's, I guess since we just had the election and everything, every time we have a big election, like there's they're campaigning and giving speeches, and there's always some story I see about a candidate using some song for their campaign rally, and then the artist will be like, don't use my song for your campaign rally. But they're like, yeah, they want to use music to help inspire people, bring people together and inspire them.
Totally. Because music's it's such an emotion. I mean, it is an emotional experience. It's like taking you from where you were and throwing you into a whole nother vibrational atmosphere. It like literally affects you.
Yeah, changes our brainwaves, and I think helps us sync up with other people.
Totally.
The rhythm and the movement. Well, do you, as a musical artist, are you consciously stepping into a role, kind of like with D&D, like a character? Like, has that been part of your musical journey?
Most definitely. Yeah.
That's interesting.
I've been a lot more intentional about it in the past 2 years, where like I like to perform as a different character, or have that be, me and my bandmates will like dress up and we'll like be a cover band to our own band or something silly. And
just have fun with it. And
yeah. Even the name Monalicious is an alter ego.
An alter ego, right?
Yeah. And it allows me to step out of my humanness, out of my insecurity. Because Monalicious, they are not insecure. They are ready to hit the stage. They're on fire. And it's like this coat that I get to put on every single time. And I get to leave behind normal Mona and step into this other version that I've built out. And then I don't have to get so caught up in like being enough for the performance. I just step into someone who is enough.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So maybe if someone's listening to this, like they could try that out. Like you can
totally,
rather than like I'm this awkward, shy person who wants to perform but can't. You can kind of like trick yourself. Like I'm just gonna create this alter ego and step into this like rock star or diva or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do that, right? I think even someone like Donald Trump, I don't know, he's whatever politician, like they kind of do that too,
Yeah.
And I wonder to what degree it's conscious or not conscious, and we never really know what they're like when they're not on stage or whatever, their public persona versus their private. But as human beings, we all have a public persona. Like we're different when we're in a group of people than when we're alone, maybe, at least to some degree.
Definitely. I appreciate the way that it allows me to practice being flexible and fluid within my identity and my ego.
Nice.
Of like recognizing that I can step into different spaces and that I really am always stepping into some space. I always have some face on, some mask. In some moments I'm, more vulnerable or more naked and raw, but I'm always interacting through, this body, through something. And so I appreciate like the fluidity that I'm able to practice of, instead of I am just this, or I am always like getting caught up in any sort of confine of who I am.
Like the less fixed identity.
Definitely. Instead, like today I could be super sensitive Mona. Or today I could be like super on fire Mona, and like not holding any shame or like feeling the necessity to be anything, or that I'm disappointing myself in any way.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think about the question of authenticity, like in this context? Like, because you could think of like being authentic as like the opposite of wearing a mask, and that could be true if you're trying to maybe manipulate or fool other people. But the way that we're talking about it, I think it is authentic. Like it's an authentic expression of a part of yourself, right?
Yeah. I think that there's some masks that we feel more used to wearing. And then there's some masks that perhaps we're wearing with manipulative motives. And some masks we're wearing unknowingly, or like with all of our struggle or with our insecurity, or masks that we think that we need to wear to be in a space with, whoever. And I think that authenticity, I really appreciate you bringing it up, because I think it is, in this moment, I'm like, is it not authentic to be trying to be someone else? Is that not like you're authentically embodying the pursuit of trying out another expression? Or is it not authentic to be in a place of not being authentic? I don't know, like folding in on itself.
It's like paradoxical.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this lately, because like authenticity is a big value of mine. It's something like I've wanted to be and how I want to show up in the world. And then lately I've been thinking about if I am, if I feel a certain emotion, it could be authentic to express that and share it. But I actually don't think it's necessarily authentic to be ruled by your emotions. Like it could be authentic to be like, okay, I feel that, and right now I don't need to express it or act on it, like having choice.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And so I think it's a pretty tricky thing to think about, like what authenticity means.
Yeah. I think it, for me, is very much associated with inner truth. So is it your inner truth to make me this tea? Like, does that feel good? Or is it like, I'm doing this because I think I need to do this, or like it actually doesn't feel good, like I don't want to share. Yeah. And so I think that in the lens of like trying out these different versions of yourself or different masks, like, is it true that you feel like, is it in your truth to be doing that, or is it out of a motive beyond, like, that isn't rooted in your truth? But I guess that's like how I make sure that I'm being authentic.
Yeah, like, so maybe the motive plays into the authenticity part.
Yeah.
Or like, are you just going through the motions versus like you're really feeling it?
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, for you, I imagine like maybe you have like a musical performance and people have paid money to come see you, and maybe beforehand you're like, I really don't want to do this. But I mean, I don't know if you feel that way or not, but like that doesn't mean that's authentic to not go up on stage. It means that your true self is like bigger than that momentary emotion or resistance, and then maybe when you get on stage you'll feel like amazing and like, oh, I'm so, this feels great. And yeah, so that's just something I've noticed in myself, like maybe the word resistance fits what I'm talking about, or just having a bigger sense of who you are than your temporary feeling state. And I feel like a lot of people, maybe especially around Boulder, like we're in touch with our emotions and we're sensitive, but that can lead to, if you let that lead you, then you could become like really flaky. Like it's hard to like make plans because maybe in the moment you don't feel like showing up to what you said you're going to show up to. And I don't think that's authentic, so it gets, I don't know.
Yeah, I would see that as like, I definitely understand what you're talking about in regards to a culture that does exist here in Boulder. And I think there's just like a lack of consideration or communication that comes with like dropping the ball on or flaking out on someone.
Yeah, I feel like that happens a lot among certain communities of people.
Yeah.
And then maybe the other extreme of that is like if you always just go by a schedule or by the clock, like that can be kind of robotic. So there's got to be some kind of middle ground there. So maybe communication is a part of that. Yeah,
I think that people should like honor their commitments, even if honoring your commitment is communicating that you can't show up to it.
Yeah at least communicate that. Well, you've been someone who has brought a lot of people together. Like community organizing has been part of what you've been up to, right?
Yeah.
How is that? Like, I don't know. Like, how do you want to speak to that? I mean, that seems like something that we need more of, like things that bring people together in positive ways. And can also be challenging, and it's also easy to get burnt out, trying to do that kind of thing.
Totally. Yeah, you gotta have a lot of fire.
Fire.
Keep it lit. And I've had extremely successful nights. More like the past few years, I've mostly had successes when it comes to community organizing or events, and that momentum keeps you coming back to it. And I've also, failed tremendously, loads of times.
Do you want to share with us a failure? Or what seemed like a failure at the time? Like maybe it's not in the long run. You know what I mean? Like.
Sure. I mean, I've definitely had, when I first started doing community-oriented stuff, or towards the beginning, thrown shows that no one was there for, or...
That's gotta be so tough.
Yeah, it comes with the question of, like, should I be doing this? Is this a necessity, or, like, am I filling a need, or am I just doing this event to like, validate the fact that I'm a community organizer? And which I think
it's a good thing to ask yourself.
I appreciate the opportunity to come back to my intention, like, why am I doing this? For myself or for the community? And I know that I do what I do for the community, and I'm also totally fine with the fact that I get a lot out of it. I don't see anything wrong with that.
It's a both and.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah. But, I would say, like, one of the last shows that I produced at the end of February, it was my first queer dance party that was presented by my new record label, and we had this, like, love note station. And someone, at the end of the night, a bunch of people left all these love notes, and I gave them to all these people, and everyone was like, wow, this is, like, so relevant. And I was left with one last card, and I opened it up, and it said, like, I haven't felt at home in Denver in years, and, like, thank you for putting this together, and, like, the community, the queer community, like, needed this.
Wow.
And I was just like, how did I end up getting this of all people that I passed out these cards to? And
was it like everyone got a different card, and that's the card you got?
Yeah.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah, and it spoke just, like, directly to me, and moments like that are validating, and, like, yeah, what I'm doing is impactful. And I think that is a huge part of it, is, like, I want people to feel connected. I want people to have moments that generate collaboration and creativity and inspiration and just, like, celebration,
Yeah.
And home, especially for, like, queer communities, I've felt really disconnected when it comes to feeling at home within queer community, and I wanted to provide, and, in collaboration with my team, like, we wanted to provide a safe space for people to, like, come and know, like, yeah, you can totally hit on that person and assume that they're queer, I think that's
because you set
valuable.
that context, and you send out those invitations. And,
Totally. Yeah.
That's a beautiful story. So I guess I'm kind of drawn to go back to, like, the beginning of the conversation. We were talking about power and these courses you're teaching in high school, and you said something about dismantling power structures, like in the Dungeons and Dragons, like role-playing that, but, like, that's inspires you in real life. Like, what do you mean by that? Like, how do you understand that, or want to speak to that? Do you, like, I guess I'm hearing, like, politically, like, that's true for you? Like, I don't know much about your political views, but it seems like part of your community organizing and efforts are, like, have this political component as well.
Most definitely. And I, like, talking about these things, as much as I'm pursuing the understanding of it, I also know, like, very little about it all. And I say that to, like, disclose anything that might be triggering to anyone hearing this.
It's tricky stuff to talk about. I
Totally
totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah. Dismantling. Yeah, I'm totally into the idea of dismantling oppressive systems.
Dismantling oppressive systems. Yeah, that's maybe a good way to put it.
Most definitely. And I think that in order to do that, we have to define the confines of an oppressive system and look at the systems around us and pursue the understanding or like just the curiosity around like, you know, colonization and how at the core of it it came to be. You know, a lot of people's wealth and success has come from exploitation of people, from exploitation of land, and I think that there are a lot of people who are comfortable because of that exploitation, even if they're not related to exploiting people.
Even if they personally weren't involved, they're
still
maybe
benefiting.
a beneficiary of the history.
Totally.
I mean, part of what I'm hearing you say is like, how can we collectively look at our history and heal and make sense of it? And
Most definitely.
it's a history of colonization and taking over this land there were already people here and
Most definitely.
all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and just like the trauma that was imposed on people of color, and also, you know, the trauma that has been imposed on white folks and either white folks in positions of power, because it is also traumatic to oppress, and it is also
That's a good point.
there's, you know, not just there has been this narrative that like it's so race related, but really it's like there's been an elite class, you know, royalty back in the day that has perpetually manipulated people to be against each other and feel like they're the problem versus addressing the actual issue, which is the exploitation of, you know, the rich on the rest of us. So in the end, we're really all in this together, and like I think that's why I'm so adamant about social power, which is all of us coming together, realizing I am not different than you. In fact, I'm dealing with the same bullshit, and you know, someone might deal with more bullshit. You know, a female might deal with not just like and potentially I guess I'm like speaking to intersectionality, where like you and me have to deal with similar things, but I might have to deal with like similar things on top of sexism, potentially on top of homophobia, you know. And I think it's important to acknowledge those things. And where do we go from there? I think there's a lot of different places to go from there.
I think we could work to make a, you know, more fair, more harmonious, happier society, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's a complicated picture, but I agree that we should try to move in a good direction. And I also agree that if someone, I don't know, use the word oppressed, like if someone does something that hurts someone else or oppresses them, like they also can be traumatized or hurt, like especially if you think about karma, if you believe in something like that. I mean, I thought that was a good point, you know, like if, I don't know what examples we could think up of right now, but just that maybe this idea of like trauma, of collective trauma, and how that impacts all of us. Maybe that's a way that we could then have a conversation where we could all start to heal together, rather than, because there's a danger of let's overthrow the oppressive system, and then like, you know, the revolution ends up oppressing the former oppressors, you know, this whole
Totally.
You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. There's a really beautiful book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where a dynamic of overturning power is kind of filtered through that lens, or looked at through that lens of being aware of just even the idea of like oppressor, and just like the power dynamic of superior, inferior. And so like letting go of that, and instead of like achieving on top or like this constant, but letting go of that and releasing like anyone being on top, and rather like coming, and that's even with social power, like anyone who is in a position of influence that's been granted to them by the people, and so it's not something they have over the people, but rather the people have lifted them up into that position.
Right. Yeah, I was actually reading this friend of mine has these little pocket-sized copies of the Constitution. He's like passing them out, and it has these quotes from some of the founding fathers, and I was reading some of that, and I was like talking kind of like what you were just talking about, like this question of how do you organize a government where it has power over people, and this idea that we can all be equal, and then elect certain people to be in power, and then they stop being in power. And it's like a beautiful idea. It's very imperfectly done, obviously, but it's a beautiful idea.
Yeah.
That we could like kind of be equal, and then you could choose someone to be a leader, and then they could stop being a leader and have someone else. And like, yeah, just like struck by that idea kind of in a new way when I was reading about it.
I think that a part of that is acknowledging that every role in society is essential to its function. Even just like a group dynamic, we put a lot of emphasis on the leader of the group, but alone they are not able to achieve as much without the work of the support team. And so every role in that in that team is essential to being effective. And so when we begin to value, a therapist just as much as the president, and obviously there's some positions where if you hold it, there is more pressure and more goes into it. But I think that's a part of it is less hierarchy on what role you have in society, and also like a little bit being able to, I think, paying people, especially teachers, like there's like there's a lot of people that don't get paid what they're worth. Yeah,
well, it seems like teachers is like that gets talked about so much, but nothing ever seems like it changes around it. But like, man, it's kind of a weird thing about our society where like we send our kids off to like spend all day with someone that we don't really know that well, and then we don't pay them well, and they might, it's like, what are we doing? Like that, you think that would be a very esteemed position, and it does carry a certain amount of respect. I think being a teacher has a certain respect, but maybe less now than it used to. Like in the past, I think maybe, I don't know.
The education system, this is a whole other conversation, but it's an oppressive system as well.
Just our whole education system, like being like forcing kids to sit in a desk and not move. Like sometimes I think about that. Like I was in elementary school and we had these desks where the chair was attached to the desk, and I remember how painful it was to just sit there. Like it didn't feel good. It didn't feel good in my body, and it sucks. Yeah, I don't like thinking about kids being forced to. Kids should be able to run around. And,
I think that is definitely a part of it, but then also like looking at like the school to prison pipeline, where we are like taking kids that are in underserved communities and not serving their needs emotionally, and then they're not coming to class because it's not relevant to their lives or the things that they're navigating, and then it's like, Tommy, you're not passing math, and so you're gonna get punished, and like this, and then they're like perpetually just in this state of navigating suffering or oppressiveness.
Yeah, well, that's a great point.
Yeah, so that's what I mean.
Like people like a student in maybe a poor area or marginalized community, like they get suspended or expelled, and then it kind of sets them on track to ending up in jail. Yeah. And it's kind of like our prison system is kind of like when in school you have to be in timeout. It's the same kind of idea. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are starting to question that idea. I hate the idea of jail, like putting people behind bars and walls. Yeah. I think we do it way too much, right? Like it's not. It's a weird. I think that there is a lot of, we need to criticize that and change it. Yeah. For sure.
I think there's a lot of effort and momentum generating around trauma-informed education practices where we're noticing if a student is acting out, it's most likely because something's going on, and finding ways to address that. There's a lot of shaming that happens in schools. There's a lot of, from teachers. There's also, I've worked in schools where the teachers just like, they're not dealing with their own emotional needs and they're taking it out on students.
Bad cycles. Totally.
And so that's what I'm pointing to with the educational system. And then we look at, like a, wealthy school district. It's perpetuating the idea of domination of like a student. Like, if you excel in life, you will be on top, you will be the best. And, like, if you listen to what I say, the teacher, you can be in a position of power someday. And it's, like, kind of even, like, militant in some ways.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And so then cultivating young dominators to come and like impose themselves on the world.
Like that's what they're kind of being trained to do or taught to do.
Yeah, and this is all like big ideas and a lot of theory, and I know that not everything's black and white. Some people, I think there's a lot of beauty in the educational system, and there's a lot of people fighting and for that beauty and for cultivating.
Yeah, it's good to appreciate it. I mean, it's amazing that we have public education maybe as much as we do. Like that didn't exist 200 years ago, right? So, but it's a lot of room for improvement. I think your point about making what people learn relevant to their lives.
Yeah.
Like I went through elementary, middle, high school, undergrad. I never took a class on how to pay my taxes, how to manage money, how to understand the economy, how to, just like basic life skills that we should be teaching people about saving, compound interest, and like that should be part of our education system. Or like health, like diet, like how to eat a healthy diet. Like I guess we get a little bit of that, but basically, like it's just there's so much stuff like that, right? Sex education. There's so much stuff that like we need to learn to like be healthy, functioning adults, and we don't really get it in school. We have to get it outside of school.
Definitely. You have to know about it.
Or relationships, that's another big one.
Yeah.
No one teaches you how to communicate effectively in a relationship. That could be a whole class that everyone could take in middle school. It could be a great class.
Definitely. Communication in general. And I think, there's just like all of these physical and social and emotional needs that are not addressed. It's hard to, and going back to the example of like, Tommy, you're not passing this math class when like Tommy's mom is having a hard time feeding them.
Right.
And so like how relevant is it that they are not doing math when they're like dealing with not being certain of their basic needs being met. And so I think that's like the relevancy of
it's a big subject.
I
think part of it that I've heard some people talk about that I agree with is like you want to have a model for what success looks like. And if there's like one model being crammed down everyone's throat, which is like go to high school, go to college, go to grad school, get a job, like that model isn't going to work for everyone.
Sure.
And it shouldn't work for everyone. Like not everyone needs to go to college or needs to go to grad school. Like it's not necessary to be a happy, contributing member of society. Like there's other ways you can find. Like maybe what you're doing. Like you're a musician, you're creating different things. Like you don't need a college degree necessarily to do that. You need to learn and grow and practice and all that stuff. But you don't need so it's just like we need to expand our models of what success can look like. And then like the basketball superstar or like hip hop rapper guy, like those aren't applicable to everyone either. Like a few people can do that, but it's like we just have these like very limited ideas of what success looks like.
Yeah.
So.
And then today I was talking to my colleagues about us pursuing fostering organic intellectualism within our students, or our student cultivating their sense of knowing that they are organically intellectual, and helping them realize that they have an inherent ability to understand things, to pursue understanding things, to know things. And I think that there's like more, even speaking to like there is no right way, but we do also need to, regardless of what you do, we need to stoke young people on the pursuit of their curiosity,
Right.
you know, and
Yeah.
maybe not like saying, hey, this is what is true, but prompting them to like dig into understanding around the
And
topic.
get them to look at it themselves. And
Yeah.
that's what education's supposed to do. Maybe it's tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ugh, and it makes me think about, like, I had a client that I was seeing, and like I'm here like as a therapist trying to help them, and their parents are paying for them to see me, and they are so unmotivated, uninvested, uninterested, and it's so hard to like find that way to like find that inner motivation. I think that's partly what came up when you were speaking just now, just like, how do you find that curiosity, that motivation in yourself? Like, it's not something someone else is doing for you or making you do, or that's what we need to like awaken up in ourselves and in other people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that goes back to like me being fortunate enough to have parents that were like affirming to my confidence, and having, sometimes you can get stuck in these like inner narratives that are just like crippling, and
Yeah, the inner narrative, like your story you're telling yourself, like how you understand yourself. Yeah.
because perspective is reality. I was telling my students that today, like just seeing perspective as these different glasses. Like today I could look through sadness and I would perceive everything through sadness, and then I could put on another set of glasses and like perceive through gratitude, and like that we have this power to try on different glasses.
Totally.
And sometimes like the messaging that we are navigating puts on certain glasses for us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that could feel good or it could be helpful for a time, but it's ultimately kind of disempowering. Like we need to find our own glasses.
Totally. Or know that that's an option to alternate perspective.
Find our own choice.
Yeah.
So we're not a victim. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, do you want to... It's been great having you on the podcast.
Yeah.
Do you want to share with people how they can find more about you?
Totally. Monaliciousmedia.com. You can check out my music, my films, projects I've been a part of, press that I've done. FM4FP.com is my business. That's free music for free people, and that's kind of like a umbrella of my record label, Free People Records. This music television network that I run called Free People TV, and then we kind of do events and other magazine projects. And Youth on Record is where I work. YouthOnRecord.org is a nonprofit that I work with young people through.
Sounds like a great nonprofit.
Yeah, I feel very grateful, and what a awesome way to embody purpose and my skills.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have found this podcast valuable, there are many ways in which you can support it. You can share it with friends and on your social media. You can leave us a review on your favorite podcast listening app. And you can visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/astateofmind. For show notes and more information unique to each episode, visit astateofmindplay.com. And to learn more about my work as a therapist, meditation teacher, and coach, visit julianocean.us. And please don't hesitate to send me a message or email and let me know what you think and contribute to our conversation. Thank you so much for your support. It is listeners like you that make all this so very much worthwhile.